Hey everybody, another virtual version of Chill. We thought this week it'd be fun to give you a look inside since you haven't been inside for a while. This should be a very familiar scene to you. The pool table and 2 balls and games to be played. I wish that we could be together to play. But since we can't, I thought it would be fun to show you something maybe you've never seen in the barn before. Have you ever wondered what's behind this door? Why don't we find out? See if we can open this up. And wow, inside we have another door. Let me get a light here so you can see. Pretty crazy looking. If we go, there's a lock in here on this door, and it's been broken off. Let's find out what's inside. Wow. I would love to be able to tell you that this is a secret passage to the high school, but it's not. This is an old Pennsylvania bank barn, and back when this was operating as a barn, this was actually the root cellar. Now you know more of the story about the barn. So let's take a minute and go outside together. Hey everybody, we'll scrap that idea. I know I said let's go outside, but I tried that and it was way too windy and there was no way you were going to be able to hear me. So here we are in the barn over by the fireplace. I wish you were all here yelling couches so that we could gather up and share in person together. I miss the things that we typically do through the spring together, some of the traditions we share in. I was thinking about that the other day when the Fish and Game Commission announced that trout season would start and be open, and it was early and it just seemed different. We didn't have Fishmas. We didn't have Fishmas Eve with everybody parked along Route 30, camping out and having campfires and waiting for opening day of trout season. Made me think of a fishing story when I was young. I was probably around 12 years old. My sister was 6 or 7, and we were at a friend's house in Naples, Florida. They lived on an inlet waterway. We always liked to fish when we went there. There were about 12 kids fishing that day. My sister was only about 5 and she was the youngest, so she got the crummiest pole, the crummiest place to fish, and the last of what we had for bait, which was shrimp, and it was only a half of a dead one, and we put it on her hook and told her it'd be fine. About 10 minutes later, my sister said that there's a big fish coming to her line, and we were like, oh, that's great, Carrie. Nobody paying any attention. Then a little bit later, she said, there's a big fish on my line, and again, nobody really paid attention. We just kind of said, that's great, Carrie, pull it in. And then she yelled for help, and we looked over and realized that she was about to get pulled in by this fish that she had hooked on her line. By the time we got it in and pulled it up, it was a really large fish, and it was a snook, which is a prized game fish in Florida. None of the rest of us had ever caught one. and they're extremely good eating. So the hostess of the house where we were fishing filleted it, cooked it, portioned it out, and let everybody try it, and it was absolutely amazing. It's a great fish story. So I want to tell you about one more fish story. This one can be found in the Bible. It's in the Gospel of John. It's toward the very end of the book. It's the last chapter, chapter 21. And it's a story about Peter and Thomas and Nathaniel, some of the other disciples. They were gathered together by the Sea of Tiberias, and it was in the evening, and Peter announced that he was going fishing. And the other disciples decided that they would go with him. So they got in the boat and they set out, and they fished all night long, and they caught nothing. The next morning, Jesus showed up on the shoreline. They didn't realize that it was Jesus when he called out to them and said, "Children, you don't have any fish, do you?" They answered no, that they did not. And he said, "Well, take your nets and cast them out on the right-hand side of the boat, and you'll find some." So they followed his instructions, and they caught so many fish that they couldn't pull the nets in. At that time, one of the disciples realized that it was Jesus on the shoreline and told Peter. And Peter got so excited that he jumped into the water and started to swim in, because they were only about 100 yards offshore. The rest of the disciples rowed the boat, pulling the large net with the large catch of fish. When they got to the shore, they realized that there was a charcoal fire burning and that there was fish and bread cooking on it. Jesus told Peter to get some of the fish that they had caught, so he climbed back in the boat. They had caught 153 fish, and even though the net was so full, it never tore. Peter brought some of the fish back to Jesus, and Jesus said, "Come and have some breakfast." And he served him breakfast. This is now the third time that Jesus appeared to the disciples after his resurrection. I hope you heard that. After his resurrection. You see, this amazing catch of fish and this breakfast on the shoreline happened after Jesus had gone to the cross, after he had died, after he had been buried in the tomb, and after he rose from the dead. It's pretty exciting. It's what we celebrated 2 weeks ago on Easter. You see, it wouldn't have been enough for Jesus to just be a good person and live a good life. It wouldn't have been enough for him to just sacrifice himself on our behalf. It had to be that he lived the perfect life and that he went to the cross to pay the penalty for everyone's sin, to overcome death once and for all. What Jesus did on the cross, he did for you and for me. He really did die. He really was buried in a tomb. And he really did rise again. He spent over 40 days hanging out with people after he rose from the dead. And this fish story is one of those examples. I just want to challenge you and encourage you with that, to think about where you put your hope and trust. If it's in anything besides Jesus Christ, it will let you down. You see, Jesus is God's only Son, And he really did die for you and for me, that we might be able to have a relationship with the God who created us. Think about that. Amen.